My wife, 47 female, was a doctor. I, 41 male, worked full-time as a real estate agent. My wife and I were well known and respected. We hosted parties once a month. Sometimes it was a cookout. Sometimes it was a formal event. We usually invited our coworkers, friends, and friends of friends. I thought about how devastating it would be if my wife and I ever split. We signed a prenup that stated in the event of a divorce, she would keep the house and the money in our joint account would be split between us. This would be null and void if either of us had an affair, though. I couldn't imagine living without my wife. Our marriage was so sweet. My wife was so honorable and loving towards me. I know I treated her in kind. We grew extremely close over 14 years of marriage. At times it felt like I was only half a person. I needed her. At one of our parties on a Friday night, my wife introduced me to a man I'd never seen before. She said he was new to the office and needed to make some friends. The three of us talked for a while before my wife suggested I take him to the golf course that Sunday. I flinched. I didn't feel like it. I'd hardly gotten to know him, but it would have been awkward for me to say no. Later that night, after all the guests were gone, I asked her why she wanted me to hang out with this guy so much. She played it off like she didn't really want me to. She just thought it was a nice suggestion. So she made me feel like it was my decision to invite him. While golfing, he was very amused the entire time. He made subtle jokes about my wife and how he'd be a member of the golf course soon. I asked him what he did for a living, because the membership was expensive, and he said he was planning to live off the inheritance from his grandfather. Something about this guy just didn't seem right. I felt like he was trying to pass off lies as facts. The last thing to put me off was when he said my wife was like his pet bunny. He could never hurt her and just wanted to take care of her. This was unsettling. I told him my wife was no one's bunny but my own, and I'd be the one taking care of her. He just snickered. The next day, my wife and I were back to the grind. I was at work when I received a message from my wife's receptionist. She knew my wife's schedule and had something to tell me. It was a long message. She didn't feel like it was her place to get involved, but eventually she had to say something. For 3 months, she noticed one particular patient scheduling a lot of appointments with my wife. He would always request the time slot when my wife was supposed to take her lunch break. Each time he requested this, my wife said she could squeeze him in. She didn't know if anything was going on between them, but suggested I come by the office to make sure. I agreed, thanked her, and asked when he was scheduled to see her next. She said he was with her right now, but they weren't in the exam room, they were in my wife's locked office. Suddenly, the situation seemed urgent. I grabbed the spare key to my wife's office and went. When I got there, it'd been 20 minutes since she locked the door. Coworkers followed close behind me, whispering. I heard someone say it was his 5th appointment with her this month. The door opened, and we all saw them laying nude on a pull-out couch in front of my wife's desk. AP was the same man I played golf with. Clothes were everywhere, so they frantically jumped up and started grabbing them. They refused to dress in front of everyone, so they pushed through the crowd of psyched onlookers to get to the bathroom. I followed my wife into the women's room and yelled in disbelief. I asked her to explain herself, but she only asked me what I was doing there. Reality hadn't sunk in yet. I told her that I was there because all her coworkers suspected her of sleeping with her patient, and apparently it was true. Hearing me say this hit her like a ton of bricks. I saw her face fall, right before she started crying her eyes out. I asked why she did this, but she wouldn't answer. Either because she was crying too hard, or because there was no reason why. Everyone knew she was cheating on me. Her carelessness led to me finding the truth, and now there was no going back. She sobbed on the floor, shaking her head. She tried to reach up to me, like she wanted me to come closer. I loved her so much, but knowing what I knew now made me angry. She didn't have enough respect for me or her profession to resist this average, random man, probably because she expected to get away with it. She had the nerve to invite him to our party, lied to me about how she knew him, and convinced me to spend time with him. Now it was clear she was going to lose her license to practice, because she slept with him. I was angry enough to leave her there on the floor. AP had left, but one of the nurses told me his name. I found his profile and the link to his wife's name. I sent her a long message, along with names of people who could back up what I was saying. Her husband was having an affair with his doctor. At the court hearings for our divorce, my wife was even more humiliated. She had taken out all the money in our savings account, even though the prenup stated otherwise. Besides that, the prenup was no longer valid because my wife committed adultery. She was ordered to return the savings to me and pay alimony payments. She could no longer practice as a doctor, was ordered to move out, and all her previous friends and coworkers turned against her. AP's ex harassed her online, commenting one specific insult on all her pictures and calling her a homewrecker. She was a respected doctor who slept with her patient. I don't know what she was thinking. I wondered why this guy, and why I wasn't good enough for her. Enough time has passed that I stopped asking myself those questions because there's nothing to blame myself for. I did what I could to be a husband to my wife, and it worked for 14 years. OP, it's completely absurd for her to suddenly do this after working as a doctor for so long. You'd think that after going through life as a doctor and wife for many years, she'd grow to appreciate and treasure both. Instead, it's as if she grew more arrogant and entitled. She behaved like she was above everyone else and could do what she felt like without consequence. I'm sure her ego was through the roof when she started her affair, and she probably told herself she deserved to have what she wanted. Thinking like this is dangerous. The best way to go through life and make decisions is to remain humble and considerate. Consider all things and potential results from the choices you have. Your main concern should be living up to your spouse's expectations because they want the best for you and see the best in you. Thank you for sharing your story with us. Let's now get into our second story for today. My wife, 32 female, and I, 37 male, were married for 5 years. We were considering having children of our own at this point. My wife had been working for a daycare for 6 years and planned on working there until she retired. She loved working with children and felt like she was getting paid to do something she loved. I was happy for her. When we had our own children, they could attend the same daycare for a generous discount. To get this job, she had to get her clearances and do random drug tests. They were sure to hire responsible, clean people. They didn't tolerate any odd behaviors or mistakes. One girl was fired recently for taking too many bathroom breaks. My wife went out one night to have a good time with some of her coworkers. She worked with a man named Ryan, AP, and 2 girls, one named Marla. Marla was friends with my wife on Facebook, so she knew she was married to me. AP had only been working with them for a few months, so nobody knew much about him. My wife and her 3 coworkers rode in her car to a bar. They met other people there that turned their night around. It wasn't until much later, when my wife was driving her friends home, that I'd receive a picture message. It was from Marla, and it was a picture of my wife kissing AP. She was in the driver's seat, leaning across the middle to kiss him in the passenger seat. I couldn't believe it. She never told me she worked with a man, and didn't tell me he would be one of the people with her that night. Marla sent a follow-up message that said she knew it would be hard for me to see this, but since we were married, I deserved to know my wife was dating Ryan. This just confused me. I asked her for more information, and she told me they'd been out alone together at least a few times. She knew this because my wife was giddy about it and couldn't resist telling her everything. I immediately started to consider a divorce. This was breaking my heart, and I'd certainly never be able to trust my wife again. There was no recovery from this. Still, I wanted to know why she felt like she needed another man, and if they ever did more than just kiss. The thought of her going on dates with him without my knowledge was very upsetting. I posted the picture of them on Instagram with the caption, "Is it true love or just an affair?" All my wife's friends and coworkers started commenting. A mom chimed in, wondering if these were the people watching their kids. Another woman jumped to conclusions, saying they probably sneak butt grabs while at work. Another person suggested they be reported, just in case something inappropriate was happening. I didn't even have to do anything. There was an army of concerned people online. My wife immediately went to bed when she got home, and I just let her sleep. She went to work the next morning without checking Instagram. While her and AP were watching children in their respective classrooms, I showed up to speak with their boss. When I showed her the photo, she acted quickly. She pulled them both out of their classes, and the looks on their faces said it all. They knew this was bad. In the boss's office, they were shown the picture and scolded. This was not the behavior their employer expected from them. AP broke down and begged to keep his job. He said he had a child of his own that wouldn't be able to attend if it weren't for the employee discount. My wife didn't know AP was married with a child of his own. She cried and asked to keep her job too, and looked at me like she was going to beg my forgiveness next. Their boss said she'd consider letting them keep their jobs, as long as one of them transferred to a different location, and they both passed drug tests. Both their faces dropped, like they wouldn't pass. With my heart pounding, I asked my wife if she did drugs. She said no, but her eyes were darting between us. Her boss asked if she'd be willing to take a drug test, but she just got defensive and said that had nothing to do with a kiss. I decided to make it even more awkward and asked if kissing had anything to do with sex. Her face turned bright red and AP excused himself. My wife followed, so I followed her. In the parking lot, I really felt my rage starting to build. I punched AP, causing him to stumble back. I demanded to know if he slept with my wife. He only denied it. When my wife and I got home, I could only think of filing for divorce. I asked her if I could see her phone, and she refused, so I told her to get out of my house. She was already so upset from losing her job, with her puffy face and reddened eyes. With more tears, she begged me to stay married to her. I asked again to check her phone, but she didn't want me to, because then I wouldn't forgive her. I asked her why she refused a drug test. Before she answered, I told her she had to be honest with me if there was any chance of us staying together. She swallowed hard and told me they met a group of people at the bar that persuaded them to have some fun by doing drugs. So not only did she cheat on me, but she also did drugs and drove impaired, and now she was refusing to let me see her phone. I ordered her to leave, announcing that our marriage was over because I'd never be able to trust her the same way again. Since AP was married and they both lost their jobs, my wife never saw him again. Now she lives alone in the only place she could find, without her job, husband, or kids of her own. All our life plans were flushed down the toilet. OP, even though the life plans you had with your wife are gone, you still have another chance at life. As devastating as this was, you discovered the truth and did the right thing by leaving her. Your ex did not behave as an honorable wife, who maintains her vows and finds the excitement and lure in her own husband. She started a pointless fling with her coworker and did drugs. Actions speak louder than words, and it's clear she didn't want to keep you or her job. A respectable woman never puts herself in a situation she would later regret. Appreciate your spouse and the tragedies you've avoided by committing yourself to them. Finding a spouse that respects and loves you is a wonderful thing that people take for granted as soon as they're tempted by another person. It's a shame, but thankfully not everyone is that heartless. Thank you for sharing your story and way of handling this. I wish you all the best. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me. Take care.